It's been 6 years now since I came back to live with my biological family, and it's safe to say they're thoroughly disappointed with me. My parents don't think I'm presentable enough, especially when compared to their adopted daughter, Sophie, who they see as elegant and bright. My own brothers, Liam and Ethan, seem to openly dislike me. They worry that I, their actual sister, might try to push Sophie out because of jealousy. And Sophie, the girl who unknowingly took my place for all those years, recently accused me of stealing her design work. Because of all this, the entire family decided it would be best to send me overseas, far away, where I wouldn't be a constant reminder of their disappointment. They've clearly given up on trying to integrate me into their lives, and honestly, I'm about ready to give up on them too. The feeling of exhaustion washed over me when I saw my design, the one I was planning to submit for a major competition, plastered all over Sophie's social media page the day before the deadline. The online reaction was swift and intense, likely fanned by forces working behind the scenes. Soon, many people online knew that a relatively unknown designer named Maya was being accused of plagiarizing the work of the well-known heiress. I pulled up Sophie's social media profile, and there it was, posted just the night before I was due to submit my work. Her caption was casual. Feeling inspired lately and thinking about launching my own fashion line. What do you all think of these sketches? Sophie has a massive online following, mostly people fascinated by her luxurious lifestyle, who adore her as the true heiress. In a way, they aren't entirely wrong. Sophie grew up surrounded by every privilege imaginable. Looking back, those designs appeared online just hours before my submission. At that time, her comments section was filled with praise and questions about when the finished pieces would be available. Now, though, the comments were full of sympathy for Sophie and anger towards me. Does that thief really think Sophie is just some nobody? She has hundreds of thousands of followers. How dare she? How can two people be so different? Stop trying to use her fame. Maya isn't even worthy of being compared to Sophie's little finger. Does that thief have an account? I need to vent my anger. The competition officials had already returned my submission materials along with a curt note stating that plagiarized work would not be accepted. If I hadn't painstakingly drawn every line myself, even I might have started to believe I was the thief. Maya, haven't you caused enough embarrassment already? Ethan stormed into the room, his voice tight with anger. You've been picking fights with Sophie constantly, and now you've outright stolen her designs? How can someone with your kind of character be part of our family? He's my younger brother by blood, but he's always been closest to Sophie and protective of her ever since I returned. He worries my presence makes Sophie uncomfortable. Sophie gently stepped in front of Ethan, her voice soft. Ethan, please let it go. Maybe Maya just wasn't thinking clearly. If I had known she was submitting that design too, I wouldn't have posted it online. Now she's facing so much criticism. Despite her words, she hadn't taken down the post, even with the controversy swirling. As she spoke, Sophie's eyes welled up and she clutched her chest, struggling to catch her breath. Ethan immediately rushed to help her sit down, then shot me a furious glare. Sophie is still trying to defend you, even though you know her health is fragile. Are you deliberately trying to upset her? Why are you so malicious? Of course, I knew Sophie's health was poor. She was born with a serious heart condition, which was the very reason she ended up taking my place for so many years. Her biological parents, knowing their child wouldn't survive without expensive care, switched us in the hospital nursery over 20 years ago, ensuring their daughter would have the privileged life meant for the child of the wealthy family giving birth that same day. The exact details of how they managed the switch over 2 decades ago are still murky. I suspect my aunt, who worked as a nurse at that hospital briefly before resigning and moving far away, might have been involved, but I haven't seen her since. My adoptive mother, the woman who raised me, also had poor health. I learned to care for her from a very young age. She often used to sigh and complain, "If it weren't for having you, I wouldn't have all these health problems. And you turned out to be a girl anyway." Back then, I didn't know I wasn't her biological child, so I just tried harder, taking care of her, doing chores, studying relentlessly to get into a good university. My adoptive father had always wanted a son. Since his wife couldn't have more children, he kept a mistress. He pressured me to get a job right after high school to help support the younger brother he eventually had with the other woman. Fate intervened when my adoptive father died in a car accident. The driver paid compensation money. His mistress showed up demanding a share, leading to a fierce confrontation with my sick adoptive mother. The stress caused the mistress to miscarry, and she left. After that, my adoptive mother's health and spirits declined rapidly. I took her to countless hospital appointments and even paused my studies to care for her full time. But she passed away 6 months later. On the night she died, she couldn't speak clearly. As I sat by her bed, holding her hand, she moved her lips, tears rolling down her cheeks. It was only much later that I realized she was trying to mouth the words, "I'm sorry." At 16, I was an orphan. I used the small inheritance to continue my education. Then, when I was 17, a wealthy couple appeared, claiming to be my real parents. A DNA test confirmed it, making my years of poverty and feeling unwanted seem like some cruel cosmic joke. The feeling intensified when I walked into their grand house and saw Sophie standing there, sheltered behind my two older brothers. My biological mother explained the situation. Sophie's birth parents passed away some time ago. She's lived with us for so many years, we consider her our own. We can't pursue any legal action. She's innocent in all this. From now on, you two will be like sisters. My biological father added, "Now that you're back, we'll change your last name legally. But let's keep this quiet for now. To outsiders, you'll be introduced as our adopted daughter." Initially, they seemed to feel guilty about what happened to me. But as time went on, the differences between me and the daughter they had raised and cherished became starkly clear. Plus, Sophie's delicate health meant they were accustomed to always putting her needs first. Just then, Liam returned home. He's my eldest brother, always impeccably dressed, with a cool, detached air about him. Following close behind was Daniel, Sophie's fiancé. Daniel immediately rushed to Sophie's side. "Sophie, what's wrong?" Ethan filled him in. "Maya refuses to apologize, and she upset Sophie like this." After hearing the story, Daniel looked at me with an icy expression. He directed his words at Liam, but his gaze was fixed on me. "Letting an adopted daughter bully your own child? Are you trying to be so charitable that you let outsiders walk all over your family?" Then, turning fully to me, he commanded, "Maya, apologize." Several pairs of eyes were fixed on me. I met Liam's gaze directly and stated calmly, "I haven't done anything wrong. I won't apologize." "Oh, so you're not going to admit it?" Ethan jumped up again. "You've always been like this, jealous of everything Sophie has. Haven't Mom and Dad given you enough? You want to take everything away from her? If you didn't steal her designs, are you trying to say she stole them from you?" After 6 years of this constant suspicion and accusation, I felt utterly drained. I asked softly, "What if I told you I have screen recordings of my entire drawing process?" But Sophie immediately burst into tears again. "Maya, how could you? Did you even record me drawing them?" I... She looked so genuinely heartbroken and wronged that my questions seemed to evaporate into thin air. Liam spoke then, his voice firm. "Since you insist on being stubborn, I've discussed it with Mom and Dad. We're sending you abroad for a few years. You can study and perhaps reflect on your actions." The message was unmistakable. The entire family was washing their hands of me, the daughter and sister who didn't meet their expectations. Liam, at 28, was the heir apparent, and his decisions usually had our parents' implicit approval. Our parents were currently on a business trip overseas but were expected back soon. Daniel, playing the role of the protective fiancé, still felt the need to defend Sophie. He looked at me coldly. "Maya, I don't care what games you're playing, but I will always support Sophie. Nothing you do will ever gain my attention." I was slightly baffled. I have no clue where the rumor started that I was interested in Daniel. Maybe it stemmed from an incident 3 years ago when they first started dating. For Sophie's birthday, Daniel arranged a spectacular blue fireworks display. It was undeniably stunning and romantic. Surrounded by a crowd congratulating Sophie, including my own brothers, I might have watched for a moment too long. No one seemed to remember it was my birthday, too. Back then, my biological father had decided that, to avoid awkward questions, I should celebrate my birthday on a different day. I never chose one, and nobody ever pushed the issue. So, every year, I watched Sophie be the center of attention while I stood alone. That particular year, I admit I felt a pang of envy, not for Daniel, but for the feeling of being cherished by family and friends, regardless of blood ties. Somehow, that brief moment of wistfulness got twisted into the narrative that I had feelings for Daniel. He's objectively a great catch, handsome and successful, but that has absolutely nothing to do with me. I didn't bother explaining myself then, and perhaps my silence was taken as confirmation. My parents returned the next day. By then, somehow, the photo I had submitted for the competition had been leaked online. The internet abuse was vicious. Some people had even photoshopped my face onto an obituary template. My father was livid. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Maya, what deep-seated grudge do you hold against this family? Will you only be satisfied when you've driven your sister away? Sophie tearfully offered to move out for the sake of family harmony, which only made my mother clutch her frail daughter tighter, looking at me with profound disappointment. How could I have given birth to someone like you? Apologize to your sister this instant. Strangely, just days before, this kind of treatment would have crushed me. But now, I felt an odd sense of calm detachment. They are my relatives by blood, yes, but family is more than just DNA. It doesn't have to be this way. I'd been struggling mentally for a while, relying on sleeping pills for the past 2 years just to get some rest, unable to confide in these people who were supposed to be my family. They were unhappy that I wasn't poised or graceful, that I couldn't bring them social prestige at events. I'm naturally introverted and prefer quiet. I was brought back into their world too late, and I wasn't naturally gifted in the ways Sophie was. My only real hobby was painting. After I came home, they hired tutors for me, and I slowly improved. My art teacher often praised my natural talent, saying I could have been exceptional if I'd started earlier. But Sophie painted too, so my family never believed the design drafts were mine. Sophie was the brilliant one in their eyes. She wouldn't stoop to something like theft. I haven't done anything wrong. After a long silence, I repeated the words calmly. My biological father's face contorted with rage, and he slapped me hard across the face. My head snapped to the side, a fiery pain spreading from my cheek through my entire body, yet I still felt strangely disconnected, almost floating. "Get out of this house!" he roared. I already knew about the school they had arranged for me abroad. It wasn't a particularly prestigious institution. They likely thought it matched my perceived abilities. Fine. After leaving the house, I went straight to the airport, bought a ticket, and prepared to leave for a foreign country. I packed light, just the essentials. As I walked out the door, I saw Sophie standing on the second-floor balcony, watching me leave. The weak, frail expression was gone, replaced by a look of quiet satisfaction. It dawned on me then that somehow, in this house, an unspoken war had started between us. She presented a different face to me than she did to everyone else. Initially, I hadn't connected negative events to her. I genuinely wanted to get along. After all, neither of us had any say in the circumstances of our birth. But after my return, her health episodes became more frequent. Sometimes real, sometimes exaggerated. I often suspected she was putting on an act, but my family always believed her, which only reinforced their perception of me as intolerant and cruel. Over 6 years, any lingering guilt my biological relatives might have felt towards me had completely evaporated. I had become the daughter with mediocre talents and a toxic personality. Ethan once carelessly remarked, "If I'd known it would be like this, I wouldn't have let Mom and Dad bring you back." That comment was the first time I truly acknowledged how sick I felt inside. My therapist suggested making friends, but I didn't really have any close connections. College classmates had scattered after graduation, busy starting their careers. Friends from my earlier life were distant memories. I wasn't a significant part of their lives anymore. I desperately wanted to leave that house. In fact, I had secretly started researching study abroad options the previous year. There was a specific school I dreamed of attending, and I figured out the application process entirely on my own. My family had no idea. No one, including myself initially, thought I had a chance of getting accepted. I remember when I first started taking drawing lessons seriously after coming back, Ethan came to my room and tried to gently discourage me. "Maya," he'd said, "you're not like Sophie. She's been drawing since she was a child. No matter how hard you try now, you'll never reach her level. I don't know who convinced him I was just trying to copy Sophie. The truth is, I've loved drawing since I was a little girl. My adoptive parents thought it was a useless pastime and refused to pay for lessons. So I learned techniques secretly from online tutorials and practiced whenever I had a spare moment. Once, I had a high fever and completely bombed an important exam. My adoptive father, convinced my poor performance was due to my obsession with drawing, got drunk, kicked open my bedroom door, and tore up all the sketches I kept hidden under my bed. He never cared much about my actual grades. He always maintained that girls didn't need much education. He just needed an outlet for his drunken anger that day. After a flight that lasted roughly 10 hours, I landed in London. Standing there with just my single 24-inch suitcase, breathing in the unfamiliar air of a foreign country, I felt a strange sense of relief, almost an inappropriate flicker of excitement. Finding accommodation was my immediate priority. I had already corresponded with a few landlords online, my English functional, though not fluent. I eventually settled on a small house with a charming little garden. It was the most expensive option I'd looked at, but the landlord needed to sell quickly and had significantly lowered the rent. Plus, it wasn't too far from the university I'd secretly gotten accepted into, the one I actually wanted to attend. It felt like a stroke of luck, so I decided to splurge and rent it. When I was first brought back to my biological family, they had deposited a substantial sum of money into an account for me, meant as compensation for the lost years. I had barely touched it. I knew it was far less than what they spent on their other 3 children, but to me, it felt like a fortune. Sophie once casually mentioned in private that the amount was equivalent to just a few months of her allowance, not even considering the astronomical sums spent on her medical care annually. After Liam and Ethan started working, they would also occasionally give her extra spending money and lavish gifts. Liam gave me a gift once, some souvenirs he brought back from a business trip. I was genuinely thrilled, only to find out later that the expensive, rare handbag included was actually a hand-me-down from Sophie. I've always been accustomed to being frugal. The mindset stuck even after learning about my biological parents' wealth. I remained cautious about spending. Now, considering tuition, rent, living expenses, and my existing savings, I calculated I should have enough to manage. I could also supplement my income with freelance illustration work online. Being away from home, away from that suffocating atmosphere, suddenly made life feel lighter, more manageable. As I moved into the new place, even though it was empty and needed a lot of cleaning and organizing, I felt a sense of hope that things were finally going to get better. Life is a wilderness, an online saying I once saw came to mind. I had over 2 months before the school term began. My original plan was to eventually tell my family about the school I got into, but since they seemed so eager for me to leave, I decided this arrangement worked out fine. On my first day in the new house, I threw away my old SIM card. It was linked to countless apps and contacts, but I tossed it anyway. Sometimes you need a clean break to start anew. I wanted to leave the past behind. Thankfully, arriving early gave me ample time to settle in. The day after I moved in, I met one of my neighbors, a Chinese woman. She looked incredibly fashionable, probably in her 50s, with vibrant, stylishly colored hair that made me slightly envious. If she hadn't mentioned her age later, I would have guessed she was much younger. Her garden was magnificent, overflowing with colorful flowers and lush plants. "Hey, little girl, are you Chinese?" Mrs. Chen greeted me warmly from across the fence. I felt a bit awkward and just nodded in response to her friendly wave. "Are you a student here?" she asked. I nodded again, aware I wasn't making the best first impression. That evening, Mrs. Chen and her husband, Mr. Chen, rang my doorbell. They brought over a beautiful pot of blooming hydrangeas. "We thought you might like some flowers for your new place. A little housewarming gift," Mr. Chen said with a kind smile. The flowers were breathtaking, covered in large, vibrant blooms. I finally managed to stammer out a "thank you." Mrs. Chen looked surprised. "Oh my, you can speak. We thought—" She trailed off, looking slightly embarrassed. "We initially thought you might be mute. We felt quite sorry for you," she admitted candidly, then quickly added, "But it's okay. It's normal for young people to be shy." That night, I sat staring at the hydrangeas for a long time, taking dozens of pictures. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen turned out to be gardening experts. As I got to know Mrs. Chen better while furnishing my little house, I learned they were financially independent and enjoying a leisurely life in London. Mrs. Chen was always energetic and cheerful. She frequently invited me over, gave me tips on where to find good furniture, taught me practical things about living in London, helped me plan my own small garden, and even shared cuttings and plants from hers. Mr. Chen was quieter but just as friendly. He often cooked, with Mrs. Chen assisting him, and his food was delicious. Maya, it's wonderful having you nearby, Mrs. Chen would say. We often cook too much and can't finish it all. They started calling me Maya almost immediately, something my own family rarely did in the 6 years I lived with them. Here, in a foreign country, I found unexpected kindness. I knew they weren't inviting me over simply because of leftover food. It was a subtle, gentle kindness offered to a young woman living alone overseas. This couple seemed to have everything they needed, both emotionally and financially. I wasn't sure how to repay their generosity, but they seemed to sense my hesitation. Maya, Mrs. Chen said one day, having another Chinese neighbor is such a rare treat, and you're just so lovely. We couldn't resist meddling a little, so please don't worry about repaying us. Once my house was properly set up, I felt my heart settle down too. My sleep was still inconsistent, and I occasionally relied on medication, but it was improving. With about a month left before university started, I needed something to occupy my time. I decided to start painting again. I bought some basic supplies, paints, canvases, an easel, and created an account on an international social media platform. I began live streaming my painting sessions. Sometimes I used a digital tablet, other times a traditional wooden easel. When using the easel, only my hands were visible on camera. They're just ordinary hands, nothing remarkable. My therapist had encouraged me to make more friends, but apart from my kind older neighbors, I didn't have any real-life connections yet. I joined a few online groups for international students, but so far, my interactions were limited to online acquaintances. I figured online friendships might be a good start. Painting was the one skill I felt confident in. At first, I just painted. If a few viewers wandered into my stream and commented that it was a bit dull, I'd put on some background music and continue painting quietly. After finishing each piece, I'd upload a time-lapse recording of the process to my profile. Surprisingly, people started watching. My subjects varied widely. Sketches, traditional Chinese ink paintings, watercolors, fashion design illustrations, even characters and scenes from comics. I wasn't formally trained in all these techniques. I mostly relied on intuition and self-teaching. I never expected anyone to actually watch me paint live. But gradually, more and more people joined my streams. Some expressed amazement, others asked technical questions. I never spoke on camera, responding instead through typed comments, often using Google Translate for English. Please forgive my limited English skills, I'd usually add. When school started, Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen insisted on driving me on my first day. They seemed genuinely excited, saying it reminded them of when their own son graduated, bringing back a sense of joy they hadn't felt in years. I didn't fully understand their sentiment, but I appreciated their kindness. Starting university mainly meant I had scheduled classes to attend on weekdays. I still returned home every evening and often joined the Chens for dinner next door. My classmates weren't all blonde and blue-eyed, of course, but there were noticeably fewer Asian students. The only other East Asian student in my program was from Korea. We chatted briefly, both slightly disappointed not to find someone from our own country. International students often stick together, not necessarily out of clannishness, but because it provides a sense of comfort and familiarity in a foreign land. However, not all compatriots are trustworthy. Occasionally, someone in the international student group chats would post about being scammed, and sometimes online drama would unfold. When I didn't have classes, I continued streaming my painting sessions from home. For reasons I couldn't quite fathom, my viewership steadily grew. Eventually, some viewers started sending donations. I quickly disabled the donation feature. Earning money through commissions felt more appropriate. Life settled into a quiet routine, punctuated by small, pleasant moments and the occasional hassle of group projects. Winter arrived in London, bringing colder weather and shorter days. One morning, as I was leaving for class, I noticed a tall man standing at my neighbor's front door, ringing the bell repeatedly with no answer. When I opened my own door, he turned around. That was my first encounter with Alex. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen had mentioned their only son, Alex, before, but I didn't recognize him. The only photo Mrs. Chen had displayed in her living room was of Alex as a chubby 1-year-old. She often joked it was her favorite picture because he was cutest then. The adorable baby in the photo bore little resemblance to the tall, striking man standing before me. He had a remarkably handsome Asian face with kind eyes. Observing his proportions, the thought immediately crossed my mind that he would make an excellent figure model. Assuming he was also Chinese, I asked instinctively, "Hi, can I help you with something?" He explained he was there to visit his parents. "Oh," I replied. "Mrs. and Mr. Chen went to Brighton a few days ago to visit friends. Didn't they mention it?" The handsome young man seemed momentarily taken aback, then thanked me after a brief pause. I was running late for class, so I hurried off, not paying much attention to where he went next. 2 days later, Mrs. Chen invited me over for hot pot, and Alex was there at the table. That's when we were formally introduced. I learned that Alex was usually busy managing the family business and rarely had free time. He was visiting before his parents embarked on their early retirement plan to travel the world. "Maya, eat more meat, you're too thin," Mrs. Chen insisted, piling food onto my plate. She tried to serve Alex too, but he politely declined, saying, "Mom, I can serve myself." So Mrs. Chen refocused her attention on me. I ate quietly, as did Alex, though his father also kept adding food to his bowl. After dinner, as I was heading home, Alex was assigned the task of walking me next door. He smiled, looking around my small yard. "I almost thought my parents bought the house next door too. The gardens look so similar," he remarked. The styles were indeed similar, thanks to Mrs. Chen's help, though her garden was noticeably neater and more established. Alex didn't leave London right away. He moved into his parents' house next door. Almost every morning, I'd see him out in the garden, tending to the plants, rearranging things for his parents. Mrs. Chen joked that his visit was perfectly timed, as he had plenty of youthful energy to expend on yard work. In early December, on a weekend evening, I planned to walk to the nearby supermarket to buy groceries. Mrs. Chen, never one to let her son remain idle, patted Alex on the shoulder. "Maya, it's getting late and it's not very safe to walk alone. Alex has some free time, let him drive you." I felt awkward refusing, and Alex seemed resigned to his chauffeur duties, readily agreeing to his mother's request. He drove me to the supermarket. The car ride was mostly quiet, though he occasionally asked polite questions about my school and studies, like a concerned distant relative. Alex did some shopping himself. When we got to the checkout, he generously offered to pay for my groceries as well. I quickly declined, retrieved my items, and paid for them myself. He looked at me with a slightly helpless expression. On the drive back home, there's a stretch of road that's usually quite deserted. Alex was driving slowly. Suddenly, I blurted out, "Stop for a second." The car came to a smooth halt. I got out and walked back a few steps. There, shivering under the dim glow of a streetlight, was a tiny kitten, meowing pitifully. There was no sign of a mother cat or other kittens nearby. Alex got out of the car too and stood beside me, quietly observing the little creature, whose eyes clearly hadn't opened yet. We both understood the situation. If we left it there, the kitten likely wouldn't survive the cold night. Not long after we got back into the car, snowflakes began to drift down outside. Cradled in my arms, the dirty little kitten seemed to fall asleep, comforted by the warmth. It was so grimy it was impossible to tell its fur color. On that first snowy night in London, Alex and I found ourselves responsible for a tiny life. Keeping such a young kitten alive proved to be quite a challenge. After a visit to the vet and a thorough cleaning, we learned it was a healthy, long-haired calico female. But a kitten whose eyes haven't opened needs frequent feeding around the clock. I took her back to my place and set alarms throughout the night to wake up and feed her formula with a tiny bottle. Alex initially offered to take the kitten, but he wasn't planning to live in London permanently and admitted he was past the age of adopting a pet impulsively, only to leave the responsibility to his parents later. Since he was staying in London for a while, though, I agreed to leave the kitten with him during the day when I had classes. Alex insisted it was fair, saying, "We found her together, so I should help take care of her." Honestly, I was relieved. I worried I wouldn't be able to keep her alive on my own. I hadn't had much success taking care of things, not even myself. But it seemed luck was on our side. By the third day, the little kitten opened her eyes, and her meows grew stronger. Mrs. Chen jokingly remarked that she initially thought we'd brought home a baby rat. That night, I decided to name her Snow in honor of the snowy night we found her. Caring for Snow meant Alex and I interacted more frequently. First, we exchanged contact information. Then, he started occasionally stopping by my little cottage, sometimes ostensibly to check on the cat, other times bringing over things his parents had asked him to drop off. Sometimes I would find myself staring at him, noticing how perfectly the features of Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen seemed to blend in his face. One afternoon, while Alex was playing with Snow, he suddenly turned to me and asked, "Maya, why do you keep looking at me?" It struck me as amusing that he, like his parents, called me Maya so easily. I admitted honestly, "You look good. I was thinking I'd like to ask you to be my model." Knowing my field of study, Alex's expression turned slightly wary. "A life model," I clarified quickly, "not nude." He let out a quiet breath, visibly relieved. "Sure," he agreed, surprising me. "Aren't you going to ask about payment first?" I asked. "Life modeling is demanding work." Alex waved it off. "I can do it for free." I knew he wasn't short on money. After thinking for a moment, I said, "Never mind then." I couldn't comfortably accept someone's time and effort without proper compensation. After some gentle persistence on my part, Alex finally agreed to accept a standard modeling fee. One weekend, Alex came over to my makeshift studio space. As I requested, he removed his shirt and then slowly unbuckled his belt, revealing well-defined but natural-looking muscles. He had the perfect physique for figure drawing. I started a live stream, carefully positioning the camera to show only my easel and the canvas. Throughout the long painting session, I occasionally asked Alex to adjust his pose or take a break. Our quiet conversation was captured in the stream's audio. For the first time, my online audience learned my nationality as we spoke primarily in Chinese. The combination of soothing background music, the focused quiet of the studio, and an attractive model created a rather compelling atmosphere, judging by the comments. When it was time to paint his face, I turned off the live stream. Alex noticed and chuckled. "Why did you end the stream now?" "To protect the model's privacy," I replied simply. He laughed again, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "They've seen the body, but the face is off limits?" I nodded. After all, Alex wasn't a professional model, and I felt it was important to respect his privacy. Once the painting was finished, I chose not to post the final image online, despite many viewers expressing eagerness to see it. Shortly before Christmas, Alex had to return home for business. He gave me his Christmas gift early, a delicate diamond bracelet. I hadn't prepared anything for him and felt a bit flustered. "It's all right, you don't need to reciprocate," he said kindly. Alex had unexpectedly entered my life, and just as quickly, he retreated back into his own world. By the time he left, it had been almost a month since we found Snow. She was now a fluffy, energetic ball of fur. I remained on good terms with my neighbors, the Chens. When I had classes, I'd leave Snow with Mrs. Chen, like sending a child to daycare. Alex and I stayed in touch, though. He often sent messages asking about Snow's progress, and I'd reply with pictures and short videos. I finally figured out a way to express my gratitude to the Chens. I offered to design some custom clothing for them. Perhaps because I was a design student, they readily agreed, seeing it as good practice for me. I took their measurements carefully. While I was measuring, Snow kept meowing around my feet, so I decided to make her a tiny matching sweater too. It was a simple knit, taking only half a day to complete. My life felt calm and filled with these small joys, aside from the persistently demanding group projects in my graduate program. Before the Chinese New Year, I finished the outfits for Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen. Mrs. Chen received a beautiful light aqua cheongsam with delicate embroidery, while Mr. Chen got a tailored black suit with matching embroidery details on the jacket cuffs. They seemed genuinely surprised and delighted with my designs. Mr. Chen, usually reserved with praise, complimented my work quite a bit. They treasured the gifts and decided to wear the new outfits for their New Year's Eve celebration. Naturally, I spent New Year's Eve dinner at their house. Just as we were sitting down to eat, Alex rushed in, looking tired from travel. He announced he had come back specifically to celebrate the New Year with his family. When he learned that the elegant clothes his parents were wearing were made by me, he fell silent for a moment, then turned to me and asked, "Where's mine?" I hadn't considered he would return for the holiday. He always seemed so busy. I assumed he'd have numerous social obligations, unlike my own family, who probably just thought I wasn't presentable enough for their gatherings, which is why they rarely included me. During dinner, I placed a chicken drumstick on Alex's plate and smiled, "Happy New Year's Eve." He looked at me intently for a few seconds before accepting the gesture with a resigned sigh. After dinner, he walked over to my place to see the cat. Snow, now noticeably bigger, ran to the door, fur puffed up in greeting. "She's grown quite a bit," Alex observed. The tiny creature that once resembled a mouse could now cause minor chaos around the house. Snow's markings had become more defined, mostly black patches on her fluffy white fur, making her incredibly cute. Alex picked her up, stroking her gently. I retrieved my measuring tape. "Want me to take your measurements now?" Alex looked surprised for a second. "Didn't you say you wanted an outfit too?" Once he understood, he laughed, setting Snow down on the rug. He casually took off his coat and sweater, waiting for me to proceed. Alex has an excellent physique. I knew that from the modeling session. But standing this close, measuring his shoulders and chest, I was acutely aware of his height and presence. I could feel the warmth radiating from him and almost sense his deliberately softened breath above my head. Snow weaved around our ankles, meowing. "It might take a while to finish the actual garment," I told him. "That's okay," Alex smiled. "Thank you for the trouble." He seemed genuinely pleased. Alex didn't stay in London for very long this time either. He soon returned home, complaining good-naturedly about his parents being relatively young, but overly eager to retire and travel, leaving him with more responsibilities. Before he left, he brought over some new toys for Snow. My studies kept me busy, but I filled my downtime with drawing, streaming, taking care of Snow, and tending to my small garden. Life felt quite fulfilling. Perhaps because I was no longer living under constant scrutiny and pressure, I found I didn't need sleeping pills anymore. The suit I designed for Alex wasn't completed until late April. I sent him a message with pictures when it was done. He showed up in London at the beginning of May. The suit was a bit more flamboyant than my usual style, but with his build and confidence, he pulled it off effortlessly. It looked fantastic on him, not at all out of place. Alex expressed genuine appreciation for the design. "My dad saw the sketches too," he mentioned casually. "He said your design sense is quite good and thinks highly of your potential. Why don't you consider learning from him?" I was a bit stunned. "Do you not know your dad's name in the industry?" Alex told me his father's professional name and suggested I look it up. It sounded vaguely familiar. A quick online search revealed that Mr. Chen, my friendly neighbor who loved gardening, was actually a rather renowned international fashion designer and the founder of a popular luxury brand. I always knew the family was well off, but I hadn't grasped the extent of it. My appreciation for the clothes I made suddenly felt less about the design itself and more about the personal gesture. "Your design style is well suited for the high-end market," Alex continued, unaware of my internal revelation. "My dad definitely knows people in that world. Learning from him directly would be much better than trying to figure everything out on your own." Alex seemed determined to leverage his father's connections for my benefit, not giving me much room to refuse as he enthusiastically detailed his father's accomplishments and expertise. He practically dragged me next door to formally ask Mr. Chen about mentorship. I had to completely reassess the friendly, middle-aged man currently watering his roses. Mr. Chen readily agreed to offer guidance, suggesting he could introduce me to industry contacts and help secure an internship at a prestigious fashion studio. He looked pointedly at his son and remarked, "You seem determined to keep your old man busy even in retirement." Alex just grinned back. "Dad, it's your time to shine. Taking on one talented student won't be a problem for you." Mr. Chen playfully told him to go home. Mrs. Chen, overhearing the exchange, was delighted at the prospect of us working together. Considering my previous ignorance, I felt compelled to ask Alex, "What did your mom do before retiring?" "She was a businesswoman," he replied simply. I had a feeling there was more to her story than just that, but it didn't seem particularly relevant at the moment. My life became even busier and more fulfilling. Alex's trips to London grew more frequent. He claimed he missed the cat. My online following also continued to grow steadily, and my audience base expanded internationally. It felt nice to be appreciated for my work, though I remained aware of how quickly online sentiment can change. In the winter of my second year in London, Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen moved away as planned. They were embarking on their world travels, with Switzerland as their first major stop. They gave me a set of keys to their house, saying I was welcome to tend their garden if I felt inclined. They promised to visit London again when their travel schedule allowed. Even after his parents left, Alex continued to visit London regularly. With the colder weather setting in, I spent most of my free time indoors drawing. Snow, now a fully grown, fluffy cat, would often curl up at my feet. "Did your parents not tell you they moved?" I asked Alex one evening, pouring him a cup of hot tea to ward off the chill. "They did," he confirmed, watching me sketch new designs in my notebook. I should have asked why he was still coming to London now that his parents were gone, but I didn't. Subtle changes had been quietly weaving themselves into the fabric of my life, and I wasn't entirely sure what they meant. Alex often cooked dinner in his parents' empty house next door and invited me over. He was an excellent cook. Snow even started wandering over on her own sometimes. We allowed the cats in the neighborhood relative freedom. I had put a GPS tracker on Snow's collar, so while she explored, she always came home safely. Occasionally, other neighborhood cats would visit my garden too. Alex didn't leave immediately after that visit. He stayed for a while, cooking meals, inviting me over, and taking care of feeding Snow when I was busy with schoolwork or commissions. Then, on an otherwise ordinary day in November, Alex suddenly said, "Maya, happy birthday." In all the years my birthday had been overlooked or intentionally ignored, someone was finally acknowledging it, celebrating it just for me. I couldn't understand why his simple words, "happy birthday," caused tears to well up in my eyes. Alex looked a bit lost, unsure of how to react. He instinctively reached out to wipe away a tear, his fingers brushing against my cheek, then freezing for a moment before gently but firmly wiping the tears away. "Why are you crying?" he asked softly. "Did I say something wrong, or did I remind you of something sad?" I didn't know how to explain the complex mix of emotions. Gratitude, sadness for past neglect, and the sheer relief of being seen. Finally, I just managed an awkward, "I'm just really happy, thank you." He looked at me skeptically but didn't press further. Instead, he stuck to his plan, retrieving a birthday cake he had hidden in the refrigerator. "I wanted to bake you a cake myself," he admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "But it was a disaster, so I bought this one instead." He turned off the main lights, lit the candles on the cake, and gestured for me to sit down and make a wish. My mind felt strangely blank, overwhelmed by the unexpectedness of it all, but I closed my eyes and made a wish anyway. Snow hopped onto the table and lay down next to the cake, watching the flickering candle flames, her fluffy tail twitching cutely. There was a soft click. I opened my eyes to see Alex pointing a camera at me. "Let me take a couple of pictures," he said as the flash went off again. In the captured image preview, my face was brightly illuminated in the dim light, flanked by the adorable calico cat and the birthday cake. I actually liked the composition. I blew out the candles. Alex then handed me his birthday gift, a delicate necklace with a 4-leaf clover pendant. "I hope you'll always be lucky," he said. Looking back on my life so far, blessed by fate wasn't exactly how I'd describe it. But it did seem that since moving to London and meeting Alex's family the previous year, my luck had started to turn around. Alex carefully fastened the necklace around my neck. The proximity felt different now, charged with an unspoken energy in the quiet room. He looked down at me, seeming like he wanted to say something more, but hesitated. "Is there something you haven't told me that you think I can sense?" he asked suddenly, his gaze searching mine. I looked up at him, puzzled by the cryptic question. Alex chuckled softly. "It's nothing." He was acting a bit strangely. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen must have found out about my birthday from their son, because they called later that evening to wish me well. Their warmth and thoughtfulness made me genuinely happy. That winter, Alex visited London several times. Initially, he maintained the pretext of coming to see snow, but eventually, he stopped mentioning the cat as his reason. He would often come over to my little cottage, sitting quietly nearby, watching me draw or paint. My patience for detailed work comes from my love for art. I wasn't sure where his patience came from. My online presence continued to grow. Brands started reaching out, expressing interest in collaborations or purchasing my designs. While reviewing the inquiries, I noticed one was from the very studio where I was currently interning, thanks to Mr. Chen's introduction. Mr. Chen was skiing in Switzerland at the time. Mrs. Chen's social media updates showed them having a wonderful time. I decided to consult them about the offer. Mr. Chen looked up my social media profile for the first time and seemed genuinely shocked by the number of followers and the portfolio of work I had amassed. "Hold on, let me talk to a friend," he said after a moment. I wasn't sure who he spoke to, but a few days later, my boss at the studio formally asked if I would like to transition from intern to full-time designer. Even though I hadn't finished my degree program yet, they offered a contract with significant benefits. Clearly, someone had pulled strings for me. This was one of the few times I'd experienced what it felt like to benefit from connections and privilege. Mrs. Chen later told me, "Maya, nothing in this world is perfectly fair. But often, we're willing to bend the rules for exceptional talent. You deserve this special consideration." I later found out that Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen had specifically worn the outfits I designed for them when meeting with friends and industry contacts, including the head of the studio, subtly showcasing my work and advocating for me. The opportunity I received was partly a recognition of my skills, but also largely due to the kindness and influence of this couple. We weren't related by blood, but as Mrs. Chen often said, "Maya, you are worthy." I was given my own small office space and an assistant. Designs that had previously only existed on paper were starting to become tangible garments. When my graduation ceremony arrived, Alex showed up with a large bouquet of flowers. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen were there too, having flown back for the occasion. They joined me for a set of graduation photos. The four of us standing together almost looked like a small, happy family. "Maya, you look beautiful," Mrs. Chen complimented warmly. "I saw your final project exhibition. It's as stunning as you are." "Congratulations," was Mr. Chen's typically concise praise. After the ceremony, the Chens left again, but Alex stayed behind. He seemed to have an abundance of free time now. He spent his days tending to both his parents' garden and my smaller one, and grooming Snow meticulously. One evening, a male model friend from one of my projects dropped me off at home after a late session. Alex was standing in my yard, holding Snow, watching us. It felt slightly awkward. To be fair, these feelings had been simmering for a while. Since I was Snow's primary caregiver, I was her default mom. But one day, I overheard Alex referring to himself as her dad while talking to the cat. Now, seeing him standing there, holding our cat, silently watching me, felt like he was waiting for me to explain something. After a long pause, I simply said, "My colleague just gave me a ride home." Alex continued petting the cat, then remarked casually, "My dad's spare car is just sitting in the garage gathering dust. You could use it to commute to work. The key is on that keychain my mom gave you." "No need," I replied quickly. If Mr. Chen knew his son was offering up his car so casually, he might actually be annoyed. Alex wandered around my garden for a bit, gave Snow a treat, and then finally asked directly, "Do you prefer guys with European features?" I shook my head. "How about Asian features?" I shook my head again. "You can't possibly like girls, can you?" Alex asked, looking genuinely perplexed. I held up my sketchbook, focusing on capturing Snow's current pose. She was nestled comfortably in Alex's arms. Alex sat down on the garden bench next to me, waiting quietly as I finished the sketch. He then said, his voice softer, "You keep avoiding the question." He saw right through my attempts at deflection. I couldn't pretend I didn't understand his feelings anymore. "Alex, you don't fully understand me," I finally confessed, putting down my sketchbook. He didn't really know the extent of my issues, how introverted, sensitive, and prone to quietness I could be. Being with someone like that could be exhausting. "What's there to like?" I murmured, more to myself than to him. What's there not to like? He countered, turning to lock eyes with me. I like you, Maya. How about you? He pressed gently. You can reject me, but I have a feeling you have some feelings for me too. I won't give up easily. Before this direct confession, he had been subtly testing the waters for months, slowly integrating himself into my life, gently intervening when he noticed my sometimes unhealthy eating habits or tendency to isolate myself. I had allowed it, let him in bit by bit. But faced with a direct question, I still felt clueless about how to proceed. I was scared that any relationship we started might eventually crumble under the weight of my past and personality. But Alex reached out and took my hand, his grip firm but gentle. Being together and liking each other is enough to start, he said softly. Whether we're truly compatible is something we figure out along the way. No one is a perfect match right from the beginning. And so, that day, he became my boyfriend. He even sealed it with a gentle kiss. In my second summer in London, the neighbor's son became my boyfriend. Alex started visiting London about once a month, usually staying for a week or so before his business associates pressured him to return. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, my social media accounts started getting flooded with comments written in Chinese or in poorly translated English. They were from netizens back in China. They kept asking frantically about my connection to Sophie. Sophie? That name suddenly reappeared in my life after years of silence. This overseas account had been active for about 2 years now. I had gained a significant following, especially after the design studio I worked for officially acknowledged my role. I was now an officially recognized fashion designer with real projects under my belt and was even preparing to enter a major international design competition. After some digging, I learned that about a year ago, some internet users in China had started clipping segments from my live painting streams and reposting them on Chinese social media platforms. As these clips gained traction through various algorithms, some observant viewers noticed inconsistencies. Every piece I created bore my signature, an artistically stylized letter M. Some fans even turned finding the M in each artwork into a kind of game. Over 2 years ago, the designs I had intended to submit for the competition also had my signature hidden within them. Sophie hadn't noticed it back then, and neither had the online commentators. I'm not sure who first spotted the strange coincidence, but the discovery ignited a firestorm on Chinese social platforms. Some initially speculated that the artist behind my account was actually Sophie, but that theory was quickly debunked, as Sophie had remained in China the whole time. Alex arrived for his next visit amidst this online turmoil. He was usually quite aware of online discussions mentioning me. He hugged me tightly first, then asked gently, "Can you tell me about your family now?" Finally feeling ready, I calmly recounted the tangled mess of my life over the past 20-odd years. Alex's family background was clearly very different from mine. He listened patiently, his expression unreadable, then hugged me again when I finished. "Do you still have the proof of your original work? The screen recordings and drafts?" he asked, gently touching my face. "You seem too soft sometimes, Maya, letting people walk all over you without fighting back. You're a designer. Your reputation is crucial. I think you need to clear your name." He then playfully poked my cheek, a small smile appearing. "Pretty soft, though, huh?" He seemed pleased by this observation. Those early designs had indeed become part of the first collection for Sophie's fashion brand. I had seen promotional photos online. Frankly, the finished garments deviated significantly from my original concepts. I hadn't paid much attention to her brand after the initial launch. I thought for a moment, then gathered the screen recordings from my computer and located my old physical sketchbooks. I composed an update for my social media, posting the evidence along with a simple statement. Then I updated my profile to include my full Chinese name, Maya Lin. Let people draw their own conclusions about the truth. One thing caught me completely by surprise, however. Somehow, someone in China leaked the carefully guarded secret about Sophie's and my switched identities. The story was written anonymously, using a third-person narrative and no real names, but the details were specific enough that it spread like wildfire online. Clearly, not everyone in my biological family's social circle was entirely clueless. People must have wondered about the sudden appearance of a teenage, adopted daughter with no clear backstory. Little did they know the truth involved such a dramatic baby swap. I was leaving my studio one evening when I heard someone call my name hesitantly. Turning around, I saw a face that felt like it belonged to a previous lifetime. Liam. I didn't know much about his current life, only that I'd heard he got married the previous year. Liam approached me alone, a complex expression of bewilderment on his face, one he perhaps didn't fully understand himself. "You were quite difficult to find," he said quietly. Comparing the Maya he knew over 2 years ago to the person standing before him now, there must have been a stark difference. I was aware of the changes in myself. I wasn't sure how Liam perceived me now. The sister they had planned to send away to an average school, who instead ended up graduating from a prestigious design program and becoming a rising name in the industry. "Did you leak the information about Sophie's identity?" he asked directly. "Is that the only reason you came all this way?" I responded, genuinely puzzled by his long journey just to ask this. He paused, then continued, his voice strained. "Sophie had a severe heart episode because of this revelation. She's in the hospital. It's serious. Daniel's parents were already unhappy with the match. Now, with her true identity exposed, they're officially calling off the engagement. Our family's company shares have also plummeted for days. Mom and Dad are devastated, practically confined to bed rest at home." "Is this outcome what you wanted?" So he was here seeking justice for Sophie. "Your family hid Sophie's true identity for years," I pointed out calmly. "That essentially amounts to marriage fraud. Breaking off the engagement seems like a perfectly reasonable consequence, don't you think?" "You're part of this family too, Maya. We're all in this together," he insisted. "Not really," I replied softly. "My household registration is independent now. You all are the family unit." Liam stared at me, momentarily speechless. After a while, he said, "We didn't know you had applied to such a good school back then. You never mentioned wanting to study abroad seriously." "And what difference would it have made if I had?" I countered. "You never believed I could get in anyway. You just thought I was being unrealistic." "You left without a word," he continued, shifting the blame. "We couldn't reach you." "I was kicked out," I corrected him firmly. Liam flinched, choking on his words for a second before recovering. "You disappeared for over 2 years. We couldn't find any trace of you. I actually overheard Ethan telling you once, 'If only we hadn't brought her back home,'" I stated calmly. "Isn't this outcome better then, just as you wished?" He looked shocked that I had overheard their private conversation. It had happened after one of Sophie's dramatic collapses. I don't even recall the specific trigger that time. Sophie had clutched her chest, cried, and the whole family descended into chaos, rushing her to the hospital while I received a barrage of accusations. Ethan's bitter words, spoken to Liam when they thought I was out of earshot, had stuck with me. Liam hadn't objected then. Finally, Liam brought up the design drafts again. "If you didn't intend to pursue the plagiarism issue back then, why release the evidence now? How dare you question why I'm revealing the truth now, after I was publicly accused of theft?" I cut him off sharply, my own patience wearing thin. "Let's not rehash the past. You all readily believed Sophie's lies back then. Of course, you couldn't fathom that she would sneak into my room and steal my work. Even if I had presented evidence at the time, you would have claimed I fabricated it. I'm sharing the truth now because I choose to. What makes you think you have any right to dictate my actions?" "But she's in the hospital now," Liam persisted weakly. "She can't handle this kind of stress." "What does that have to do with me?" I replied coolly. "Maya." Another familiar voice interrupted us just then. Alex had arrived to pick me up from work. He casually slung an arm around my shoulder, looking at Liam with a neutral expression. "Liam, right? I've heard about you." "And you are?" Liam asked, frowning. "Alex," he introduced himself simply. Liam studied Alex for a moment, his frown deepening. "You look somewhat familiar. Where have I seen you before?" Alex ignored the question. "We're heading home now," he said politely but firmly. "If there are any negative consequences resulting from this situation, they brought it upon themselves, wouldn't you agree? So it would be best not to bother my girlfriend unless it's truly important." With that, Alex gently steered me away. Later, walking home quietly beside him, I asked, "Was it you who found someone to write that swapped daughter expose online?" Alex just smiled mysteriously. The writing style was pretty compelling, don't you think? Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen somehow learned about the family drama unfolding back home and decided to cut their travels short, moving back into the house next door temporarily. Mrs. Chen looked at me with deep concern. "Maya, it's okay. We can be your family too." After 20 odd years of feeling adrift and alone, their simple words felt incredibly reassuring. While the Chens stayed for a few days to offer support, Alex ended up staying with me in my cottage. His parents didn't seem to mind his extended presence. Mrs. Chen just rolled her eyes fondly. "I always knew there was something up with this boy. Never saw him visiting his parents this regularly before he met you." One afternoon, Alex was lounging on my beanbag chair in a white tank top, petting Snow. His long fingers playfully teased the cat's whiskers. Annoyed, Snow gave his finger a gentle nip, more of a warning than a real bite, then waddled away looking like a fluffy, stubby-legged sausage. Alex chuckled. What a little chubster. The cat would likely be even more offended if she understood human language. He looked over at me, then opened his arms invitingly. "Want a hug?" So I went over and sat down beside him. Alex easily lifted me onto his lap with one arm, playfully weighing me. "Am I getting chubby too?" I asked. "No, you're too light," he countered immediately. "You're different from the cat." "You should probably go back to your parents' place," I suggested half-heartedly. "This isn't quite right." Alex just pulled out his phone and started texting. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Telling my parents to go back to Switzerland," he replied casually. "My girlfriend feels awkward having them next door." I punched him playfully on the arm. The family drama, however, was far from over. Liam hadn't left London. He intercepted me outside the studio again a few days later, asking if I would return to China with him. I thought for a moment, then replied, "My work and my life are here now. Why would I go back with you?" My mind flashed back to the stolen designs. Why exactly did Sophie steal my designs to launch her brand? Judging by its performance, I bet she hasn't made much profit in the last 2 years anyway. My wit felt sharper these days. "Maya!" Liam's patience finally snapped, but he quickly reined in his temper. "Come back with me. I'll make Sophie apologize to you. And don't forget, Dad and Mom supported you financially for years after you returned. Your allowance wasn't insignificant. Mom isn't well. She really wants to see you." I met his gaze steadily. "Have you forgotten? During my freshman year of university, Sophie claimed her expensive necklace was missing. It mysteriously turned up hidden in my room. After that incident, Mom informed me she was cutting off my allowance as punishment. It was never reinstated." Liam clearly remembered the incident. He froze, his face paling slightly. "It was never restored?" His voice trailed off, uncertainty clouding his eyes. With the truth about the design theft now exposed, Sophie's credibility had undoubtedly taken a hit in his mind. If she could steal designs and blame me, why couldn't she have planted the necklace to frame me? Back then, I had cried and insisted I didn't know how the necklace got into my room, but no one believed me. "Compared to the money spent on the three of you over the years," I continued calmly, "the amount spent on me was minimal. If you feel the family is owed restitution, feel free to sue me for repayment." They wouldn't, of course. Their precious family reputation was far too important. Finally, Liam left London defeated. He hasn't bothered me since. I poured my energy into my work, focusing with my team on the upcoming international design competition. It was a hectic period, demanding long hours and intense creativity, but the results were incredibly rewarding. Winning a major award at the competition served as my official debut onto the international fashion scene. Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen resumed their travels, urging me via video calls to simply enjoy my relationship and career without worrying about family drama. Alex watched them sign off, leaning lazily against my doorframe, looking like a nosy neighbor keenly interested in their travel itinerary. Time moved forward, neither too slowly nor too quickly. Another Chinese New Year arrived. Alex showed up at my door again, this time wearing a festive red puffer jacket, suitcase in tow, ready to spend the holiday with me. His parents were celebrating in Switzerland this year. The self-proclaimed filial son cheekily remarked, I came because I sensed you missed me terribly. My parents certainly don't. It became our own quiet New Year's Eve tradition. We spent the evening relaxing on the couch with snow curled between us, watching a recording of the Spring Festival Gala on TV. Due to the time difference, it was already the first day of the Lunar New Year back in China. It felt surprisingly peaceful and nice, spending the holiday just like this. But echoes from the family back home inevitably intruded. One day, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number from China. Maya, don't you want to come home? It was my biological mother's voice, sounding hesitant. It struck me as ironic. I'd had two sets of parents in my life, but only with the Chens did I ever feel the unconditional acceptance parents should offer their children. I have my own job and life here, I replied evenly. What would I go back for? If you come home, she pleaded, her voice trembling slightly. Your dad and I can make things up to you, okay? There's no need, but thank you, I said politely. Are you planning to completely cut ties with this family? My usually composed biological mother sounded genuinely choked up now. I gave birth to you, Maya. Don't you acknowledge our blood relationship? Yes, after returning, I had lived a comfortable life materially. But compared to the attention, trust, and resources lavished on my siblings, there was a vast difference. I often wondered if they truly felt I didn't fit into their high-status world, why did they bring me back in the first place? And why couldn't they show me even a fraction of the tolerance and trust they gave Sophie? Sometimes I wish they hadn't found me at all. What did you say? The voice on the other end was sharp with shock. Nothing important. Let's leave it at that. Please don't contact me again unless it's absolutely necessary. I ended the call. I had significantly reduced my live streaming activities by then. One night, however, another call came from China. This time, the voice surprised me. It was Ethan. He sounded slightly drunk and very agitated. He demanded to know if I wanted to see the family completely fall apart, rambling about how Sophie had been dumped and asking if I was happy now. He had always been the most fiercely protective of Sophie. I only said one thing before hanging up. Ethan, do you remember that girl you were interested in right after college graduation? She liked you too. She asked Sophie to pass a love letter to you. I saw Sophie tear it up. And with that, I ended the call. After winning a few more design competitions and establishing my name further, Alex and I started seriously discussing my future career path. He suggested I could launch my own independent brand, just like his father did years ago. I don't have that kind of capital, I stated realistically. I do, he replied simply. I hesitated, knowing that accepting his financial backing would inevitably change the dynamics of our relationship. But Alex preempted my concerns. Name one truly successful entrepreneur who started completely from scratch with zero outside help. Go ask my dad, he'll tell you. Part of the reason he married my mom was because he needed her family's investment to launch his business. Mr. Chen probably had no idea his son was sharing these potentially embellished family secrets again. The truth, as Mrs. Chen later told me, was that Mr. Chen was determined to start his business, but his own parents feared he'd fail and become destitute, so they pressured him to marry his then-girlfriend, Mrs. Chen, for stability before they'd offer any support. Eventually, I signed a formal investment contract with Alex, giving him a 20% stake in my future brand. I decided to base my new company back in my home country, feeling it was the right market to start in. Not long after securing the initial funding and starting the groundwork, Alex proposed. We obtained our marriage license shortly thereafter, which somewhat complicated the investor-investee financial relationship on paper. Life became incredibly hectic with setting up the business, so we decided to postpone the actual wedding ceremony until the following year. Alex, however, was eager to be officially married, hence the quick trip to get the license. I was already 27, and he was 3 years older, just hitting 30. He often joked that a man's market value plummets after 30 and pleaded with me to take pity on him. When Mrs. Chen and Mr. Chen found out we got married without a big family discussion, they initially scolded us playfully for being impulsive, but quickly returned from their travels bearing lavish wedding gifts. They had truly become my parents in every sense that mattered. Years seemed to blur together. I still vividly remember meeting Mrs. Chen for the first time, her vibrant energy, her kindness, her elegant yet cheerful demeanor. She held my hand once, gently urging me to carefully consider how I wanted to handle my relationship with my biological family moving forward. Ultimately, she said, the decision of whether or not to invite them to our future wedding ceremony was mine alone. But she worried about potential gossip and lingering regrets. Before I had fully processed her advice, a sort of family reunion occurred unexpectedly. It was at a large industry banquet. Alex accompanied me, partly because he didn't entirely trust me to handle interactions with my biological family alone, fearing I might be easily swayed or hurt. He said he was bringing me along to learn how to navigate such encounters. At the banquet, we inevitably ran into my biological parents and Liam, Maya. Liam recognized me first. Hearing my name made my parents stop in their tracks too. It had been over 4 years since I'd last seen them in person. I suppose I must have changed significantly in their eyes. Liam commented, "I saw you registered a new social media account back home recently. I guessed you might be returning." Since registering the account, my inbox and comment sections had been flooded with messages, a mix of gossip, curiosity, and unsolicited opinions. My biological mother looked at me, her expression searching, as if trying to reconcile the person before her with the daughter she remembered. Her tone was noticeably softer than before. "Maya, it's been such a long time. Aren't you planning to come home for a visit?" "Too busy," I replied politely but distantly. My biological father, the man who had once slapped me and thrown me out of his house, looked distinctly uncomfortable. Clearly unhappy with my detached attitude, he seemed about to say something reprimanding but held back. I paused for a moment, then gestured towards Alex. "This is my husband, Alex." "You got married?" they exclaimed in unison, shocked. My father finally found his voice, laced with indignation. "How could you make such a serious decision like marriage without discussing it with the family?" Alex stepped forward slightly, smiling smoothly. "That's entirely my fault," he interjected. "I heard your family only truly acknowledges one daughter, whereas my family couldn't wait to welcome another daughter into the fold. So, I rather quickly took her home. Please understand, he always had a knack for delivering subtle barbs with a polite facade. By now, my biological family likely recognized Alex, or at least his family name. Alex primarily managed Mrs. Chen's family's business empire, a chain of luxury 5-star hotels. Alex was considerably wealthier than I had initially realized. The night we got our marriage license, he had casually shared the combination to his family's main safe with me, saying, "Maya, they may not want you, but our family cherishes you. Don't be sad, we are your family now." When I first returned to China to set up my business, Liam had mentioned that our biological mother was unwell. I did go to visit her once and ran into Ethan at the doorway of her room. I nodded briefly and prepared to walk past him. "Maya, you don't even see me?" Ethan challenged, stepping in my path. "I see you," I replied calmly, attempting to move around him. Ethan, still possessing his characteristic fiery temper, blocked me more forcefully. "I have a question for you." "Ask," I said simply. He seemed momentarily thrown off by my directness, pausing before speaking. "You clearly saw Sophie tearing up that letter back then. Why didn't you tell me?" His voice held a trace of resentment. I figured he must have eventually confronted Sophie, finally realizing that the sister he had adored and protected had deliberately sabotaged his potential romance. It was too late now, of course. The girl he liked was already married. "If I had told you back then, Ethan," I countered quietly, "would you have believed me?" Ethan fell silent. After a long pause, he opened his mouth as if to argue, but no words came out. I went in to check on my birth mother. She was lying in bed, looking frail and exhausted. I overheard the maids whispering later that the mistress of the house, who had always doted on Sophie, had recently had a massive argument with her. "Maya." My mother opened her eyes and looked at me, her voice weak. "We didn't know you got married. We didn't prepare a dowry." She gestured towards an envelope on the bedside table. "The card there holds a little something from your father and me." "No need," I replied softly but firmly. "When we hold the wedding ceremony, I'll send you an invitation." This kind of belated compensation felt hollow, lacking genuine sentiment. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Chen, had advised that sometimes making these superficial gestures still holds some social significance, even if the feeling isn't entirely there. As I was leaving the house, I overheard Ethan complaining bitterly to Liam in the hallway. She won't even call me Ethan anymore, let alone brother. Later, I learned that Sophie's heart condition had deteriorated significantly, requiring her to stay long-term in a specialized nursing facility. She used to feign heart problems for sympathy and manipulation. Now, ironically, she didn't have to pretend. Still, she was fortunate in a way. The family was willing and able to pay the exorbitant medical bills to keep her comfortable. Her ex-fiancé, Daniel, had also gotten married to someone else. Ethan, who had so often been manipulated by Sophie, finally seemed to grasp the truth behind her facade. Sophie had ruined his chance at happiness because she couldn't tolerate the idea of another woman potentially gaining favor within the family, especially one her brother genuinely cared for. She couldn't prevent Liam's marriage, as his wife came from a similarly influential family through an arranged introduction by elders. Ethan apparently went through a rough patch, even drunkenly confronting the girl he once liked, demanding to know if she ever truly cared for him and begging her to divorce her husband and be with him, only to get punched by the understandably angry husband. What's lost is lost. The girl had genuinely moved on, fallen in love, and built a life with someone else. The more Ethan couldn't let go, the more resentful he became, and his once strong bond with Sophie completely fractured. I learned some of these details from Liam's wife. Whether intentionally or just making conversation, she shared tidbits when she commissioned me to design a gown for her. I treated her with professional courtesy. Honestly, she confided over coffee one day, when I first married your brother, I didn't care for Sophie at all. Always complaining about feeling unwell, constantly calling Liam for minor things. But I couldn't exactly criticize my sister-in-law, especially one with a supposed heart condition. She paused, then added with a wry smile. Eventually, I found out she wasn't even his real sister. It made me furious, realizing we'd kicked out the actual sister for her sake. My family called them crazy, and we almost divorced over it. She smirked. If I had known the full story beforehand, I might not have married your brother. Now, watching her interact so inappropriately familiar with the men in your family, even as an adult, it's frankly disgusting. Acting like a teenager when she's nearly 30? I just listened quietly, offering no comment. I was planning to have a child last year, my sister-in-law continued, sipping her coffee. But I decided to wait. The doctor says without a heart transplant, Sophie might only have 2 years left at most. And finding a suitable heart, some people wait forever and never get one. She looked at me cautiously then, her expression shifting. Maya, do you still hate them? She asked, perhaps out of genuine curiosity, perhaps fishing for information on Liam's behalf. I smiled faintly and shook my head. No hate, I replied honestly. It's not important anymore. They aren't important to me now. I have a new family. Back at home, Alex was busy in the kitchen, wearing an apron. I walked up behind him and wrapped my arms around his waist, leaning my head against his back, recharging myself in his presence. How come you're cooking tonight? Been learning some new dishes I wanted you to try? He said playfully, turning slightly. You know, all my friends with wives brag about keeping them happy with their culinary skills. I can't afford to lose face. You're amazing even without cooking, I assured him sincerely. Our chubby cat, Snow, who had moved back to China with us, meowed insistently at my feet, seemingly accusing me of greeting Alex before her. Meow. Alex turned fully then and kissed me softly. Good girl, he murmured, then addressed the cat. Wait over there, Snow. Dinner will be ready soon. The late afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting long shadows. The warm, orange-red glow bathed everything in a soft light, even making Snow's calico fur seem richer. A feeling of warmth, contentment, and cozy belonging settled over me. Epilogue, Mother. My real daughter was maliciously swapped at birth by her biological parents, but the innocent child I raised. Sophie. I couldn't sever the love I had poured into her for 17 years, and away from our resources, her fragile health wouldn't grant her much time. So our family kept Sophie. For the daughter who had just returned, Maya, I wanted to care for her, provide for her, but she felt like a stranger. I tried to compensate with money, with things. Yet, having been raised in a different environment, she seemed to have picked up undesirable traits: lying, stealing, jealousy. Frustrated, I decided to teach her a lesson by cutting off her allowance. I only intended it to be for 3 months, but somehow, amidst everything else, I forgot to reinstate it. Initially, I wasn't overly worried when Maya ran away from home. After half a month, I discussed it with my husband. We agreed that if she came back and admitted she was wrong, we would let her return. But her phone number was disconnected. I assumed she was still angry, giving us the silent treatment. A month later, with still no contact, real anxiety began to set in. Sophie suggested maybe Maya was just being stubborn. 3 months passed. We finally realized something was seriously wrong and began searching, checking places she might have gone, contacting the few people we knew she might have known. There was no trace. Our biological daughter, lost once, was missing again. I wanted to file a missing person report, but the potential scandal, the damage to our family's reputation, I hesitated and ultimately held back. As time dragged on, no news began to feel like good news, a fragile hope she was safe somewhere. I once believed Maya's return had caused all the upheaval in our home. But after she left, even more problems surfaced. Liam's wedding preparations were soon underway, forcing me to temporarily push my worries about Maya aside. That temporary delay stretched into 2 long years. Then, the truth about the design theft emerged. Maya's alleged plagiarism of Sophie's work was proven false. Liam grew suspicious, questioning Sophie relentlessly until she finally broke down and confessed. We finally understood that Maya had been wrongly accused all along. Soon after, the explosive secret of Sophie and Maya's true origins leaked online. The Zhao family immediately moved to break off Daniel's engagement to Sophie, and the shock sent Sophie into cardiac arrest. Our biological daughter, the one we had looked down upon, was meanwhile thriving, building her own successful career entirely on her own, far away from us. When I saw Maya again after all those years, I could barely recognize her. She had changed so much. She was married, yet her husband never brought her home for me and her father to formally meet. I genuinely felt deep down that she had truly left this family behind. Later, I overheard her affectionately calling someone else Mom and Dad. I couldn't recall the last time she'd called me Mom. It was then I truly understood that in every way that mattered, I had lost my own daughter forever. Yet I still remember the overwhelming, pure joy I felt the day we found her again, after believing she was lost forever. The regret is profound, suffocating. But there's nothing I can do now. There's no going back. Epilogue. Liam. With Sophie's delicate health, the entire family instinctively favored her, protected her more. It became a habit, ingrained over years. I forgot, or perhaps chose to forget, that Maya wasn't receiving what she was rightfully due. Later, much later, I tried to see things from her perspective. I realized that she, my actual sister, seemed to constantly be on the receiving end of blame and suspicion. I'm married now, and my relationship with my wife is generally good, but she often gets angry with me, even now, because of lingering issues related to Sophie. Learning that Sophie wasn't my biological sister, and that we had effectively kicked out our real sister to protect her. My wife called our family crazy and nearly divorced me. The damage is done. Maya turned out to be far more exceptional, more resilient than any of us ever imagined. Sophie could have lived quietly, comfortably at home, perhaps even found some measure of peace. But her actions led her down a different path. Now her being in that nursing home is probably for the best, for everyone involved. Whether she receives a heart transplant or not is ultimately up to fate. This family is fractured, broken apart, partly because of Sophie's manipulations, but also undeniably because of our own choices, our own blindness. After Maya got married, any faint hope of her returning to the family fold vanished completely. Her husband can offer her far more stability, support, unconditional acceptance than we ever could or did. Later, Dad discussed transferring some company shares to Maya in his will. I didn't object, but Maya refused them. which, frankly, makes sense. She doesn't need them now. Dad insisted on including it anyway, perhaps to ease his own conscience, perhaps for some other reason I don't fully understand. We messed up. We prioritized the wrong things, the wrong person. We confused familiarity with love and obligation with family. Epilogue. Alex. When I first met her, her eyes held a fragmented galaxy. Beautiful, certainly, but missing vital pieces, reflecting a soul that felt incomplete. Over time, slowly, carefully, I helped her gather those scattered fragments, helped her fill the void. Now her eyes shine like brilliant whole stars. She still doesn't fully realize it sometimes, but she's the brightest star in my sky.